Out from the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
The first truly modifiable layer of your resilient shield is the mind layer. As Ben explained in the introduction, it's all things spiritual and psychological. There's a reason why it leads in the first of the modifiable layers. It's the first amongst equals. The mind layer is the reason why you get out of bed on a cold winter's morning and pull your running shoes on, or you actually make an effort to undertake some professional development to improve your competence and confidence in the professional layer of your resilient shield. But what is it that makes the mind layer so important? Well, let's look at the contemporary challenges that we confront. The first is that constantly, per day, you are being force-fed 34 gigabytes of information. Now, this research out of the University of California in Los Angeles is concerning. In contrast to that, our brain is 200,000 years old. And we aren't joking when we tell you that. Our brain volume has not improved nor increased for 200,000 years. On top of that, in the military, we're trained to be hypervigilant. It's very difficult for us to turn off that hypervigilance. Your mad monkey mind is constantly thinking about 4 to 7 things concurrently. And yep, you're doing it right now. Listening to me, but also thinking about a range of different things. This is the problem. How can we disconnect from hypervigilance? How can we reduce the 4 to 7 things that our mad monkey mind is constantly thinking about in order to achieve some mindfulness and meditation? There are 2 parts to the mind layer. The first is mindset. How do we build a bomb-proof mindset? How do we train mindset? And how do we assess our mindset? And the second component is the importance of meditation and mindfulness practices. Let's explore those 2 things now. If we were to ask you what you desire most in life for yourself, or your family, or your colleagues, a lot would answer to be happy. Happiness is an interesting construct. You have agency in your own happiness. But there's 2 ways that happiness breaks down. The first way belongs to a psychologist out of the United States called Paul Bloom. Paul Bloom, his research proves that we get happy by overcoming a struggle. There is no happiness without struggle, according to Paul Bloom. And the feeling of happiness that we get, that is not really comparable with anyone else, is a result of 1 or more of 7 neurochemicals that form a cocktail to make us feel happy. Think about a time in your life where you overcame a struggle. It might have been recruit training or officer training, a specialist course, a really challenging physical activity or exercise, or a complex mission on operations. That you could close your eyes now and think about that moment and still feel happy. Well, it's proof that 1 or more of 7 neurochemicals can still fire, that you have agency in Paul Bloom's model of how to feel happy. However, there's a second school of thought. There's plenty of things that you've done today that made you feel happy. Maybe just a little bit happy, but they didn't require a lot of effort. There was no meaningful challenge that you overcame. There was not really too much adversity. Taking a cup of coffee, taken the dog for a walk, kissed your kids. All of these things don't really demand too much effort, but all of them might have made you feel a little bit happy. That school of thought belongs to Dan Gilbert. He describes that feeling of happiness as synthetic happiness. Now, synthetic happiness sounds a bit fake, but according to Dan Gilbert, it's as fake as nylon. We can't go to a nylon tree and pluck nylon off it, but we can certainly interact with it. It has a tactile component to it. The reason why we feel happy under the synthetic happiness model is that still one or more of those 7 neurochemicals will fire. You have agency in being happy in every minute, hour, or day of the week. So what's the difference between the two? Why do we need meaningful challenges? Why do we need a struggle to overcome in order to feel happy? Why can't we just grasp synthetic happiness? The reason for that has also been proven in research. Unfortunately, under the synthetic happiness model, if I thought about the cup of coffee that I had today, tomorrow it won't fire any of the neurochemicals. But if you thought about the meaningful challenges that you overcame, the struggle that you're able to conquer, it might still fire one or more of those neurochemicals. In reality, pursue both. As an agent in your own happiness, look for meaningful challenges, but also don't shy away from the little things that you can do to be the best version of you, but also to contribute to your happiness.
Now, Tim told us that synthetic happiness doesn't last very long, and this links us into a really interesting discussion on this wider topic of emotions. There's been some fascinating research, including that of Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, a neuroscientist who actually had a stroke and observed herself from a neuroscience perspective through that process. But Bolt Taylor's work is really focused on this topic of emotions, and she reckons that the average emotion only lasts 90 seconds. Think about it. 90 seconds. Not a lot of time. What happens in that 90 seconds is a bunch of neurochemicals are released, and this is what brings on that feeling that we associate with the emotion. Now, if we take this into consideration, it can give us some great tools to deal with some of these emotions, particularly those that are counterproductive. There's a wonderful concept known as surfing the urge. Now, this is a technique that's often used with things like addiction therapy, but it can be great for any kind of emotion that we don't want to have a negative impact on our life. Essentially, surfing the urge looks at an emotion like a wave. There's some form of trigger, there's some form of peak, but importantly, there's also a crest and a fall. If we're able to surf that urge and not succumb to the emotion for about that period of 90 seconds, then we can ride that wave. We can come down the other side and generally get back into a much more pleasant state of well-being. So keep that in your mind. Another thing that I think is really important when we think about emotions is that they don't define you. I personally have found it really useful to try to develop what they call meta-awareness. That is, an outside observation of all that weird stuff that's going on in my head. These days, as I feel myself getting worked up, sometimes I can step back and say, that's my amygdala firing, that's anger coming on. And just by providing that distance, all of a sudden it doesn't feel so overwhelming, doesn't feel so scary. Likewise, I can sometimes catch jealousy rearing its ugly head, or fury, or embarrassment, or even shame. Any of these emotions that we don't feel contribute to our well-being, if we can surf the urge, they can end up placating and making us feel a lot better. Another fantastic way to think about how to deal with emotions comes courtesy of a pretty amazing individual named Viktor Frankl. Now, Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. He was tragically imprisoned in Auschwitz through a long period over the Second World War. And he not only survived that period of internment, but came out the other side to write an incredible book called Man's Search for Meaning. One of the most beautiful quotes from that book is the idea that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And within that space lies our ability to choose and ultimately our happiness. We love this. What it means to us is that you don't have to knee-jerk react from every single stimulus that comes your way. You have got that space. Just like surfing the urge, we've got the ability to make a choice about how we respond to any particular stimulus. Again, this understanding that emotions are not ourselves and they do not need to drive all our actions can be a really powerful way of reframing how we deal with the stimulus that we receive in our day-to-day lives.